In this section, we will explore how remote learning changed the reading habits and preferences of Victorian students. Remote learning refers to the situation where students had to study from home using online platforms due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Victorian students experienced the longest periods of remote learning in Australia, which had a significant impact on their reading skills and attitudes. According to a prestigious international reading exam called PIRLS, Victorian students were the only Australian cohort to go backwards in their reading results in 2021. The average student score fell 14 points compared to 2016, and the proportion of higher performing students also declined. The test was taken by Year 4 students after they had just returned to face-to-face learning following months of lockdowns. The PIRLS results also showed that 1/4 of Australian Year 4 students do not like reading, and that girls continue to outperform boys in every state and territory. The test also revealed the decline in Australian teachers' job satisfaction, which may have affected their ability to support students' reading development. Some experts suggest that remote learning took away many opportunities for reading and learning development, such as one-on-one lessons, feedback, and peer interaction. They also point out that remote learning may have increased the digital divide between students from different socioeconomic backgrounds, as some may have had less access to devices, internet, and books at home. However, not all the effects of remote learning on reading habits and preferences were negative. Some students may have found more time and freedom to read for pleasure, explore different genres and topics, and use online resources to enhance their reading skills. Some teachers may have also used innovative strategies to engage students in reading activities online, such as book clubs, podcasts, and digital storytelling. The Victorian government has provided money for tutoring to help catch up any students that have fallen behind in their reading skills due to remote learning. This initiative has been welcomed by schools and parents, who hope that it will help students regain their confidence and interest in reading. The government has also invested in mental health support for students and teachers, as they cope with the challenges and stress caused by the pandemic. In conclusion, remote learning changed the reading habits and preferences of Victorian students in various ways. Some of these changes were positive, while others were negative. The PIRLS test results showed that Victorian students had the biggest drop in reading results across the country, but also that they still performed above the national average. The government and schools are working together to address the gaps and issues that emerge from remote learning, and to foster a culture of reading among Victorian students. How remote learning affected the reading comprehension and literacy skills of Victorian students. Remote learning has been a challenging experience for many students and teachers in Victoria, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. But how did it affect the reading comprehension and literacy skills of Victorian students? In this section, we will look at some of the evidence and impacts of online schooling on reading outcomes. One of the sources of evidence is the Progress in International Reading and Literacy Study, PIRLS, which is a test that measures the reading achievement of Year 4 students across 57 countries. According to a report by the Herald Sun, Victorian students had the biggest drop in reading results across the country between 2016 and 2021, when they sat the test after returning to the classroom from full lockdown. The report says that Victorian students dropped 15 points on average, and only 13% of them were in the highest band of reading achievement, compared to 19% in 2016. The report also says that there were more students who did not meet the reading standards, and that 1/4 of Australian students did not like reading. Another source of evidence is a paper commissioned by the federal government, which was written by researchers from the Centre for International Research on Education Systems, CIRES, and Mitchell Institute at Victoria University. The paper modeled the impact of online learning on students from disadvantaged backgrounds, which included students from low socioeconomic communities, rural and remote communities, Indigenous communities, and those with a disability. The paper found that missing 2 terms of classroom teaching could lead to students falling 6 weeks behind on numeracy and 4 weeks behind on reading. The paper also suggested that school students faced up to a 25% annual decline in mathematics learning and a 10% decline in English learning when studying remotely, compared to learning in the classroom. For disadvantaged students, the decline was even higher, 23 to 33% for numeracy and 15 to 22% for reading. The paper identified some of the challenges that schools and governments faced when it came to home learning, such as the material divide, the digital divide, the skills and dispositions divide, the parental support divide, and the adjustments divide. These factors could affect the quality and quantity of online learning for different students, depending on their access to resources, technology, skills, support, and adjustments. The Guardian also reported on the issue of remote learning and its impact on Victorian students. The article quoted some experts and educators who said that remote learning had widened the gap between advantaged and disadvantaged students, and that some students had disengaged from school or skipped classes during lockdown. The article also mentioned that the Victorian government had provided money for tutoring to help catch up any students that had fallen behind, which was welcomed by schools. In summary, remote learning had a negative impact on the reading comprehension and literacy skills of Victorian students, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds. The evidence from international tests, academic papers, and media reports showed that online schooling led to lower reading achievement, less enjoyment of reading, and more disengagement from school. However, there were also some efforts to address these issues, such as providing tutoring and support for students who needed it. How remote learning impacted the reading motivation and engagement of Victorian students. Remote learning has been a challenging experience for many students in Victoria. One of the areas that has been affected by this mode of learning is reading. Reading is a crucial skill that supports academic achievement, personal development, and lifelong learning. However, remote learning has posed several barriers to reading motivation and engagement for Victorian students. First, remote learning has reduced the opportunities for students to access a variety of books and reading materials. Many students rely on school libraries, public libraries, and bookshops to find books that suit their interests, preferences, and reading levels. However, due to lockdowns and social distancing measures, these sources of books have been limited or unavailable for many students. As a result, some students may have struggled to find books that they enjoy and want to read. Second, remote learning has disrupted the social aspects of reading. Reading is not only an individual activity, but also a social one. Students benefit from interacting with their peers, teachers, and families about what they read. They can share their opinions, feelings, and questions about books, as well as get recommendations and feedback from others. These social interactions can enhance students' reading motivation and engagement by making reading more fun, meaningful, and rewarding. However, remote learning has made it harder for students to have these interactions, especially in synchronous online classes where time and attention are limited. Third, remote learning has increased the demands and pressures on students' reading skills. Reading is an essential component of online learning, as students need to read a lot of texts on different platforms and devices. These texts may include instructions, assignments, feedback, emails, chats, slides, videos, and websites. Students need to read these texts carefully and critically to understand the information, follow the directions, and complete the tasks. However, some students may find these texts too difficult, too boring, or too overwhelming to read. They may also experience fatigue, distraction, or frustration from reading on screens for long periods of time. These factors have contributed to lower levels of reading motivation and engagement among Victorian students during remote learning. Reading motivation refers to the desire and willingness to read for various purposes and goals. Reading engagement refers to the amount and quality of attention and involvement that students have when they read. Both motivation and engagement are important for developing and maintaining reading skills and habits. However, research has shown that many students have experienced declines in their reading motivation and engagement during remote learning. This is a concerning issue because reading motivation and engagement are linked to reading outcomes and well-being. Students who are motivated and engaged in reading tend to read more frequently and widely, which helps them improve their vocabulary, comprehension, and general knowledge. They also tend to have higher academic achievement, self-confidence, and enjoyment of learning. On the other hand, students who lack motivation and engagement in reading tend to read less often and narrowly, which limits their learning opportunities and growth. They also tend to have lower academic performance, self-esteem, and satisfaction with school. Therefore, it is important to support the reading motivation and engagement of Victorian students during remote learning. There are several strategies that can help students overcome the barriers and challenges that they face when they read online. Some of these strategies are providing students with access to a range of books and reading materials that match their interests, preferences, and reading levels. Encouraging students to choose what they want to read and giving them autonomy over their reading goals and activities. Creating opportunities for students to interact with their peers, teachers, and families about what they read through online platforms such as blogs, forums, chats, or video calls. Giving students positive feedback and recognition for their reading efforts and achievements. Modeling good reading habits and attitudes by showing enthusiasm for reading and sharing personal reading experiences. Reducing the amount of text that students have to read online and offering alternative modes of delivery such as audio or video. Helping students develop effective reading skills and strategies for online text such as skimming, scanning, summarizing, or evaluating. Allowing students to take breaks from reading on screens and encouraging them to read print books or magazines. These strategies can help foster a positive reading culture among Victorian students during remote learning. By supporting their reading motivation and engagement, we can help them develop their reading skills and habits that will benefit them not only in school but also in life.